Welcome back. Here's the next fun project. We are getting rid of the steering box. We're getting rid of the traditional drag link and all the tie rod connections for the steering, and we are putting in a rack and pinion system. The reason this came up as a just got to do it is when I started problem solving, getting a radiator in between those two horns and getting a large enough radiator that would fit into the body. And while the front grille, it appears tall, it really isn't, because it's the width of the fenders that are going to limit the height of the radiator. And then it's just not going to be enough. I don't believe it's going to be enough volume to properly cool an LS that's going to be running on a track for potentially hours. So while it might have been worth an experiment and see how it works out, it's just when you got into custom radiators, it was like, yeah, let's just go ahead with a radiator that we know works with an LS, and then do what we have to do with the steering. And that steering box was the very, very, very front of the car anyway, so getting rid of that there, it's going to just open up a lot of options. So I looked for rack and pinion systems that would bolt into an S10. And there's a couple out there, but they are manual. They're not power assist, and they bolt into the steering box location and the drag link location. And those locations, I really don't want them to be there. So I felt like, okay, even if I buy this alleged bolt-in S10 system, I'm going to be customizing stuff to make it fit the way I want it to fit, which means changing the mounting bracket, or it means just getting, really getting custom with it. So why spend $1,500 on a system that I'm going to just cut and weld and make something else happen? And the other reason is that I already had this. This is out of a 68 to 72 A-body GM. I had it bolted into my Chevelle for about 1.5 years, and it worked fine. Honestly, the only reason I got away from it was I just, while it was terrific on the track, it just, for driving on longer road trips, it just didn't feel the way I wanted it to feel. And I wanted a little bit more of a traditional steering box feel. So I went back, tried it, preferred that, so left it out. So this beast is a lot bigger, obviously, than what this is going to fit as far as the inner tie rod ends. But there should be some options to customize that. Whether I have to get into some fabrication or whether I can find other parts that are available. I would think finding parts would be available, but the interesting part is that Moog doesn't really want to talk to me outside of stock replacement situations. They have a lot of data on their website, so I might be able to figure something out. And Unisteer, who made that steering system, definitely was in a, yeah, if you're varying from stock, forget it, we don't want to talk to you about it. So while they were polite about it, they were not really helpful in, yeah, try this or try that. They were just like, yeah, we don't do that. They're happy to sell me replacement parts for this if I need it, but not to even have a conversation about, hey, does that S10 manual rack have compatible parts? They did tell me that they weren't compatible, but there was no data on their website that allowed me to look up anything as far as thread pitch or the way things engage. So I'm a little bit on my own with that, but I think Moog is going to have some solutions, hopefully. Otherwise, I'm fabricating, and going to definitely have to fabricate the frame horns so that they fit and hold that where I want them to. And I also was planning on hacking the heck out of those horns because I want to create a decent core support location for a more stock-like radiator. So this will be kind of a twofold situation. It'll be get the steering in there in a sound way, and also while working on it, figure out what the radiator is going to be sitting on, and then of course some kind of bumper brackets. But I believe the outer sides of these frames are going to survive, or some version thereof, and the inner will absolutely go away, and there'll be some other kind of reinforcing that goes in. So anyway, this should be fun, and I will keep you guys updated as I go. Okay, we're well underway with hacking and slashing and head scratching, and that is the original sway bar that was on the S10 frame, which I'm sure I will not be using that exact one. I'm sure I'll get something bigger and stronger, but that's kind of the shape it's going to be. and I've had that bolted up so I can kind of figure out what to do with routing and bracketry and stuff like that. I thought I'd be able to use the full bracket that came with the rack, but frankly, it was going to end up messing with the sway bar mount location, so it's easier just to alter it and make some new brackets. So I've got one started on that side. That is out of 3/8 plate, and which is what the bracket itself is made out of, so I'm staying with the same idea. And then I'll be working on this side. Where the drag link bolts on, it's set at an angle, which I don't really need, and that bulk I'm going to get rid of on that part of the frame. Clean that up now. It's all a little snug in there, as it usually will be, and then you can see there's some markings on the original engine mount location. That is all in the way of steering linkage, and in some cases, you just go ahead and use a hole saw and create a channel that you can populate with linkage. In my case, that is also going to be in the way of bracketry on the engine. If I decide to mount the engine, that red line would represent the front of the pulley. And if I use that location, that's all in the way. If I move it back a couple inches, it's not quite in the way, but still a little bit. So I'm gonna clearance all that and rebox it in, and probably end up doing the same thing on this side, depending on how it looks once the engine's in there. All right, just kind of an update, and we'll see how it goes. More of that CAD activity. Still got to cut some more, but it's a start. Okay, so here's where we're at so far. We got the rack in, made the brackets for the rack, bolted those in. Got the sway bar set up where it's supposed to be. Obviously, we're going to change it to a better one, but those bushings are blown out, but they're pretty much the same, just different beefiness, but they route the same. And then while I was figuring out doing a core support mount, I realized I really needed some kind of bracketry to hook up a front bumper. So that's where these hacked plasma cut by hand ground 3/8 plate beasts came from. I'm going to spend a little bit more time when I have a little more patience with them, just get them cleaned up, looking a little bit more professional, but that's the idea. They go on the side, through bolts, on this side, sharing the original steering box bolt, and on the other side I've got bolts welded on the inside for that, and then I'm going to strengthen that. The yellow marking you see is going to be a cut down to create a flat space that's lower. Those two frame rail horns, I keep calling them, are exactly in the way of the cooling fans, and I'll get to that. I'll show you the radiator in a second, the situation for that. But every little inch helps, and so getting those a little lower will help with getting the corners of the fans as well as give me a nice flat spot to attach the mounts for that. I made this to represent the radiator I picked out. What I decided to do when I started figuring out I could pull it off is I'm actually going to use the exact same radiator that Holley uses for the 68 through 72 A-body OS swap. So I've got experience with that thing. It supports two 14-inch fans with a shroud. And that thing has got AC, it's got a automatic transmission cooler in front of it, and that is 415 at the wheels, and I have no problem with heat on road trips, on the track, on anything. So I know that that radiator will work for what I'm doing with this, so I'm making it work. Anyway, so there's the model, and then what I did was, let me climb in here, was I made a core support. Okay, let me climb in here so that I don't fall down, which would be funny. Okay, let's see. All right, so there is a core support that I made. Basically what that is a 4x2 rectangle tube that I selectively cut, and then I've got a little support under there that goes to some body parts. And then on the top, this design has an upper and lower fender. Apparently the early ones were just one big giant piece, and then they would get dented and it was a big problem. So Ford decided that having the lower part of the fender was an easy repair. So anyway, there's a seam between the two, and I bolted into that with some angle iron to just give me some rigidity, and then attached a 2.5 by 1.5 square tube to the rail. So that is my core support as of now. And then the body mounts are going to come off the side of that and connect with whatever I finish up there. And the reason this was such a big deal to do a model with it is, let's see if I can get this in here. Okay, so there is the radiator centered in the engine compartment. And the problem with that is the water outlets on this side end up hitting exactly the frame rail. So there's no way, I mean, I could put a super sharp 90 on there, I could get custom, but it just seemed ridiculous. So I decided to make this thing extra wide and kept it symmetrical. I could have just made it fit the radiator and shifted over, but I decided I wanted to make it symmetrical. And so the radiator will sit over there, and the water out, the lower water connection will miss that, and then the upper is fine. What's funny is the radiator fill is going to either require some kind of hole in the top of the fender, or I'll have to use one of those inline ones off of another line. So this is shifted over, and then the reason I did the model was that I needed this thing completely up against the grill to still have room for the radiator and the cooling fans to clear the front of that lower section. And why I couldn't hack that away is that that's where the sway bar bolts in. You can see the sway bar bolt is actually protruding out, and there'll probably be a relief in the front cap on there so that that thing, so that it can sit out. Also, it'll give me a water drain for whatever gets into the frame. So anyway, there's been a lot of head scratching and figuring out on this. And the takeaway is going to be that in order to service the radiator, it will not fit through that little tiny opening. You won't be able to tip it because everything will be in the way with the frame. You might be able to, but I really doubt it. So I think what's going to happen is to service the radiator, the front clip's going to have to come off, which is going to be really fun. It's not that big a deal. It's 5 bolts on each side plus the core support bolts. So it'll be, what is that, 12 bolts. So as long as I'm mindful to not populate the inside fender sheet metal, that's not there yet, but as long as I don't populate that with a bunch of engine accessories and am selective about how I route stuff, it should be fine. But that's my solution. So there we go. I will try to throw some pictures and some short video in as it gets built, and then do another one showing the intersection of it all once the body mounts are on. As always, that took a little bit longer than I thought it would, but it is back together, and the frame is hacked and slashed and strengthened on the inside with welded in nuts for attachment, and then I even got a little bit of a cross member on the inside of that side. And on top, there's a welded nut on the back side for the mounts that are going to come off that that core support that I made up. So I'm going to drop the body down on it and then start playing with the alignment off the core support. So there is the first mount. Yet to be tacked in. I'm going to make the other one and then just make sure the front is level before I tack it in. But that's how it's going to work. Coming at you from the engine compartment. Yes, those are in and they are sturdy, and having aligned them a few times, it is clear I'm going to have to do more for a inner fender well, just to keep the engine compartment sanitary, but also for stiffness. If I were to rely on the fenders as thick as they are, I think the front end would just flop around too much, which wouldn't be good for the radiator. Anyway, the notches are all in, and I've got some threaded pins in there for right now for alignment, just less hassle than bolt. But Yeah, that was quite the process, but I am happy to say this thing could roll around now, body on the frame. So thanks for watching, and if this is interesting to you, make a comment, hit like, and thanks for watching.